Hello and welcome to Managing During COVID-19, a community development CDBG, home, and ESG program update today. We want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. We appreciate all the hard work that all the housing authorities and all the affordable housing providers and community development agencies are doing during this difficult time. So again, thank you for being there. Before we get too far in, I do want to touch on a couple of technical pieces, just so we're all on the same page. I will be your moderator today. I am George Urbana, NAHRO Director of Policy and Program Development. Again, if you are having any technical difficulties, please feel free to contact us at professionaldevelopment@nahro.org. Again, professionaldevelopment@nahro.org. Or you can call us at 202-289-3500, 202-289-3500. For GoToWebinar, if you are having issues with sound or seeing the presentation, 90% of the time it can be corrected just by logging out of GoToWebinar and logging back in to the webinar, and that will correct about 90% of the issues. But if that doesn't fix it, please feel free to contact us. We are going to take advantage of a couple of features of GoToWebinar today. The chat and question feature. If you have any questions for our presenters today, please feel free to drop those into the chat box or the question box. We'll come into our queue and we'll address those during the session. Today, for today's session, there are no handouts, so I just wanted to make sure you're not looking for those. We will be posting a recording of today's session as well. That'll be available on our NAHRO coronavirus page, www.nahro.org/coronavirus. That should be up on the page by tomorrow. It's also a great resource, that webpage, to be able to see all current and up-to-date information on coronavirus and how housing authorities and the federal government are responding to it, to gather that information, not just from HUD, but from other federal agencies as well. A great resource for housers out there. But with that, I'm going to turn things over to our NAHRO CEO, Adrienne Todman, to kick things off.
Great. Thank you so much, Georgian. Thank you for those really important instructions to make sure we have a successful call. And good afternoon and good morning to all of you out there, and welcome to another webinar from your NAHRO friends here in Washington, D.C. This is one of the series of webinars that we've been bringing to you since March, just to keep us informed and engaged as we go through this unprecedented time in our country and global history. Thank you for all of our members who are also on the line. We are happy to be able to represent you and your issues here in DC, and look forward to bringing you valuable and timely information. Before I introduce our president, I also want to give a very, very special thank you to our NAHRO's Business Partners Council. This is a very special group of members that NAHRO has that represents many folks who are the vendors and private sector partners of who help many of our public sector partners get their work done. And they're an important part of our membership, and I salute each and every one of you out there, our Business Partners Council. If you're interested in knowing what the Business Partners Council is and does, you're more than welcome to visit our website, as you see on the slide right now, at nahro.org. I'd like to give a very special shout out to one organization that received our very first Business Partners Council award last year, and that's Go Section 8, who's a great team. We work with them often, and I know many of you do as well. And so congratulations, Go Section 8, on your award last year. And with that, I would now like to introduce you to Sunny Shah. Ms. Shah is NAHRO's president and a wonderful colleague and an amazing administrator and executive director at her agency, the Housing Alliance and Community Partnerships, located in Pocatello, Idaho. I give you our president, Ms. Shah.
Thank you, Adrienne, and welcome, NAHRO family. You know, I have to tell you, I really miss seeing you face to face, but I am so grateful that we're part of an organization that brings us together on a regular basis during this pandemic, so we can learn from the most amazing leaders in our industry. So shout out to NAHRO and thank you for pulling this all together. Membership, thank you for joining us today. It's going to be a great and informative hour that we're going to share together. We were so happy last week to have Assistant Secretary Hunter Kurtz with us. And today we are very glad to have a HUD Assistant Secretary for Community Planning and Development, John Gibbs. That's the acting HUD Assistant Secretary, John Gibbs. And Mr. Gibbs, we look forward to what you're going to be sharing with us today, as well as working with you going forward into the future. Thank you for being here with your team, and we look forward to everything that you have to share. So I turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much, Sonny. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Adrian, as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the call today. And so again, my name is John Gibbs. I am the Acting Assistant Secretary for Community Planning and Development here at HUD. And on behalf of the President and Secretary Carson, I want to thank everyone on this call today for being on the front lines and responding to this crisis and being there for your communities as they respond to this challenge that we're facing. We know pretty well by now that this crisis has had a really devastating economic impact. In fact, recently, more than 20 million people have filed for unemployment. And so this means that many families who were employed and stably housed before the crisis are suddenly experiencing a pretty large financial crisis and housing crisis. And so in response to this, Congress passed the CARES Act legislation on March 27th. This legislation gave HUD $5 billion for our Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG for short. It gave us $4 billion for our Emergency Solutions Grants Program, or ESG for short, and $53.7 million for our Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS program, or HOPWA for short. And I'm very proud to report that on the same day that the President signed the CARES Act, we, HUD, notified congressional committees of the formula allocations for the first $2 billion in CDBG funds, the first $1 billion in ESG funds, and the HOPWA funds as well. Now, the reason that we acted so quickly to notify Congress on how we were going to divide up that money and allocate it, that's because we wanted our grantees to know that help was coming as soon as possible. And I'm also happy to report that thanks to the hard work of our team here, on May 5th, just 39 days after the CARES Act was signed into law, which was a record for our HUD CPD grant programs, all funding for the first wave of the CARES Act for CPD formula grant programs was reserved and grant agreements made available to our field offices in order to support our 1,700 plus grants. And our field offices are now in the process of reviewing plan amendments that have been submitted and executing those grant agreements. So that is an ongoing process happening right now. Further, just 2 days ago on May 11th, we actually did announce the allocation for the second $1 billion of our CDBG funding from the CARES Act. That means that there's an additional $2 billion, which we have not announced the allocation for yet. Unlike the first $3 billion, the remaining $2 billion does not have a date attached to it that we are required to announce the allocation by. Congress has told us to do it on a rolling basis based on coronavirus factors as well as other economic factors as needed. And so we are working right now on the allocation for the remaining $2 billion in CDBG funds. And we are also in the process of finalizing the allocations for the remaining $3 billion in ESG funds for homelessness as well. Congress has given us until June 25th to do that, but we want to get that done obviously much sooner, and we think we will be able to. So we're busy at work on that right now. So for those who don't know, I just want to go over really quickly some of the self-implementing program changes for CDBG that were authorized directly in the CARES Act. The first is that public services cap of 15% was suspended for FY 2019 and 2020 funds, as well as CDBG CARES Act grants. We are going to reimburse grantee costs regardless of the date incurred. Planned deadlines were extended for fiscal years 2019 and 20 to August 16th, 2021. The citizen participation period has been expedited from 30 days down to at least 5 days, and public hearings can now be virtual. For our ESG program for homelessness, I want to go over a few of the CARES Act flexibilities there as well. The Act did remove the emergency shelter and street outreach cap that was in place. The administrative expenses cap was raised from 7.5% to 10%. The matching requirement has been eliminated. Grantees are allowed to deviate from applicable procurement standards as long as procuring goods and services to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Citizen participation and citizen consultation requirements were waived. There was no minimum period of use for emergency shelters. And those are the major ones for our ESG homelessness programs. And it goes without saying, of course, that the funds appropriated by Congress for CDBG, ESG, and HOPLA that I mentioned above must be used to prepare, prevent, and respond to coronavirus. And in addition to the flexibilities that Congress has given us directly in the legislation itself, we were also given the flexibility to go ahead and issue our own waivers of statutory and regulatory provisions in order to enable our grantees to respond in a more expedited fashion to what's happening in their communities. And so we have done that. It will take me quite a while to go over all the waivers and flexibilities and extensions that we've done for our programs in CPD, but please do go ahead and visit HUD Exchange or HUD.gov/coronavirus. Either of those websites are going to go ahead and give you access to the waivers we've done and information about how you can use these funds in ways that are different than normal in order to respond to the crisis. And I would like to close here by reiterating something I mentioned earlier, which is just to give great thanks to our staff. I've got 3 of our great staff members on the call. I've got Jameen Bryan, who oversees our Special Needs and Assistance Programs Office that does our homelessness programs. Her team has been spectacular. I've got Jesse Hanforth-Combe on the call, who has been doing a lot of the work with CDBG and the block grants, as well as Jenny Sardone, who has been doing work with our home program, which is used for building affordable housing. All of their teams have been doing an absolutely spectacular job in just getting things moving really fast, keeping things moving, responding to all the incoming requests we have from a million different directions at the same time. And so for me, coming into this role in March, right when all of this stuff started happening, it could have been very overwhelming, but thankfully we have such great people here in CPD and at all of HUD that has made the process relatively smooth. So I just want to give a great thanks to our staff who are on this call with me, as well as those who are not on this call, just for the great work that they're doing. And I also, again, want to thank you, Sunny, as well as thank you, Adrian, and thank you everyone in your organization and those who are on this call for the great work that you're doing. And I think now we can move into questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbs, and I appreciate the gratitude that you're showing to the staff here and elsewhere. It is a interesting, curious time to live in, and we appreciate your leadership that you're exhibiting inside of HUD. So we'll jump off straight into the questions, and I see one question here deals with the utility of CDBG funds, and here is the question: could CDBG CARES funds be used for rental payments, mortgage, and or utilities under a public service activity if payments are made directly to the provider on behalf of the family? I'm happy to read the question again.
I think I picked up the question, but I'd like to hand that one over to my colleague Jesse, who I think could give us some clarity on that.
Hey, John, thanks. And thanks, everybody. The answer to the question is yes. The CDBG program, the entitlement CDBG, which is the city and county part, refers to those kinds of payments as emergency payments. And they're allowed, provided they're paid to the provider, and for a period of up to 3 months. States, in state CDBG, they read directly off the law. They may or may not adopt that entitlement regulation, but they certainly may if they choose to.
Great. Thank you so much for that response. Thank you so much for that response. There's another question here on how do we handle non-emergency maintenance repairs in our units? They're not specifically pointed out to any particular program. So how do we handle non-emergency maintenance repairs in our units?
Thank you for that. It's quite broad. That has applicability to our CDBG and ESG in terms of repairing units. I'm not too sure that. So first, could we have Jesse take a stab at that, and then Jameen? I'm not sure if this has any intersection for ESG or not, but we can yeah, let's see what we have there.
So CDBG is be used for the rehabilitation of housing units. If it's regular CDBG and the household it's benefiting is low and moderate income, the grantee can choose to do that. For the CDBG coronavirus, CDBG CV funds, everything they do has to be linked, reasonably linked to prevention, preparation, or response to the coronavirus. So, you know, that would have to be established before you could use the funds for housing rehab. But it doesn't sound like a CDBG question exactly, so I hope.
So this may actually be a home question, if I might jump in. This is Ginny Sardone. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting us. So this may in fact be a question regarding ongoing inspections of home assisted units. And if that's the case, we actually cover that fairly extensively in the two waiver memoranda that John signed off on April 10th. So both for tenant-based rental assistance units and for home assisted rental units, we have suspended the requirement to do ongoing inspections, sort of according to that schedule through December 31st. However, we are requiring that home participating jurisdictions and project owners make sort of reasonable efforts to deal with health and safety or emergency issues within those units. So in case it was a home question, there's your answer.
Thank you so much. And there are a couple other questions that have arrived in the queue. Will there be any CDBG waivers and flexibility released soon for activities?
Jesse, I can go ahead and take that one.
We have drafted a notice, and it's in the final stages of what we call pre-clearance right now. But I can't tell you exactly what's in it because we're in the rulemaking posture, but we are considering, we have gotten a lot of requests from grantees and stakeholders regarding waivers, and we're definitely taking every request seriously. We are trying to figure out the best path forward for everybody through this.
So I think we have another person here who is advocating on behalf of some waivers, and it says HUD has provided waivers to many of the CARES, ESG, and home requirements, but they are looking particularly for flexibility to the public benefit and job creation retention documentation that's required. And so I'm not sure if that, given the last response, that's something you can respond to, but it certainly sounds like there's an interest in some flexibility there.
Yes, we've definitely gotten a lot of requests around, this is a request around what we call special economic development to help with, primarily the requests are coming in about small businesses, both retaining jobs and creating jobs for the new normal, both. And public benefit in particular, CDBG staff, everybody that works with CDBG knows that's out of date. I don't think I'm talking too far out of school to say that we're bringing those concerns to John very soon. And once decisions are made, we're going to be getting word out as fast as we can.
Thank you. Another question. Can CDBG funds be used to cover a few months of back rent for low-income tenants who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID?
Jesse, again, we'll go ahead and bounce it to you.
Okay. Under the emergency payments question, that was the first one, that is a possible program design. Under the existing regulations, actually. You said a few months though, so I will repeat that we do have a 3-month limit on that in the regulation.
Yeah, I think creating that 3-month response is excellent because it did say Another eligible to use, can CDBG COVID funds be used to provide case management services?
And Jesse again.
In certain circumstances, case management supporting an activity that CDBG eligible is certainly eligible. Standalone case management isn't something that I've seen, but if they want to bring a particular case to us that we can look at, there's probably a way to do it.
Right. And I suspect this is a question inside of the home ESG suite. How is income eligibility determined for those that are now low income due to the pandemic, but were previously over income?
I will take that first for home, and then if Janine has something to add, I can turn it over to her. So we have provided waivers for people who are currently in home rental units, who are applying for home rental units, or who are applying for home tenant-based rental assistance. But generally, income is determined using we project forward anticipated income for the next year by looking at the past 2 months documentation and then making adjustments for things that have changed. But we understand that the income documentation that many people have that reflected the a period earlier this year is not indicative of their current income. So we have provided a waiver, permits self-certification of income through December 31st for applicants for home assistance, home TBRA, or a home unit. And so they don't have to look backward at previous income. So for home, we do have that covered by waivers. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to weigh in for their programs.
Okay, so hearing none, I'll keep moving. For tenant-based rental assistance home transitional programs, would the CARES Act allow rental assistance payments for tenants past the usual 24-month time limit?
So there isn't actually anything in the CARES Act related to the home program. The waivers and the suspensions that we were able to provide are based upon the suspension authority that we have in the home statute. The home statute does have a limitation that a rental assistance contract cannot exceed 24 months. However, it is renewable. So that is not something that we felt the need to waive, since since it's not, there is no real impediment to continuing tenant-based rental assistance beyond an initial period.
Okay, and I'll stay in home, but pivot to the capital side of home funds. If we are currently constructing a building using home funds, but we are not going to meet the completion date within the time frame that was established from the date of funds were committed, do we need to apply for an extension, or has that been waived and some new time frame extended by HUD?
Excellent question. So for those of you who are not aware, there is actually a 4-year completion deadline for projects funded by home. So within 4 years of the commitment of home funds to a project, the construction needs to be completed and a certificate of occupancy issued. So what we did was we extended by waiver all the deadline for all projects beginning, I believe it was the date of the President's emergency declaration, or no, I'm sorry, it was April 10th, the date of the waiver. We extended all all deadlines that will occur from April 10th through December 31st till December 31st. So there are no deadlines that will be occurring during that time, and we're actually going into IDIS on a regular basis and removing any flags that the system has generated. We'll have to make decisions about whether or not we would consider extending that waiver beyond that. Ultimately, that's going to be John's decision. and we'll base it upon sort of whether we have continued disruptions to construction activity. So, so if you have a project that falls in that time frame, your new 4-year project completion deadline is January 1st, 2021. And at that point in time, if you're not done, you still have the ability to apply for that 1-year extension.
Great.
Please call your field office, whoever submitted that question, if they can call their HUD field office for additional details and how this might apply to a specific project.
Got it. Let's see, here's an interesting question. Can CDBG CV be used for Wi-Fi infrastructure to provide internet to low-income households?
Yes, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a few ways not to do it, but you can, for example, beef up the signal in a community center so that it expands out across a park. You can rent one of those event trucks that they put at concerts, which we're not having right now, and put it in the middle of a low-income neighborhood and boost signal to everybody. You can rehabilitate houses and make them ready for broadband. You can help bring broadband into rural areas that don't have it much the same way that you would bring broadband into, water and sewer into those areas as a utility. The one thing that we have problems with is if you just like buy MiFi hotspots and hand them out, because we don't do personal property, but you could do a lending library, work with a library and lend out pieces of electronic equipment to help, for example, school children or employees to get online using a lending thing where the owner of the property was a public entity.
Great. Thank you. Now we'll move to ESG question. Will the remaining $3 billion to be allocated in ESG include a state minimum?
Currently, the formula hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jermaine Bryan. So currently, the formula will follow the language in the CARES Act and will be based on sheltered, unsheltered, and the language that's in the CARES Act. At this point, we do not anticipate any caps. It'll just be based on the formula that we are developing at this time.
Thank you. And there's a question here for maybe clarification or some examples. It says, I heard the callers mention you can deviate from the procurement process as a result of COVID-19. Under what circumstances would that be applicable, and can you give an example?
So for our programs, it is if there's an emergency buy, it would alleviate the need to do a competition. That's one example of deviating from standard procurement guidelines. And we will flesh this out in a little bit more detail in the notice that's being developed for the ESG funds as well. But that's one example.
Thank you.
For CDBG, we are following the OMB guidance. We're not changing the regulations, but OMB has signaled that the threshold for at which you have to do a full competition, they've raised it substantially, and we're looking at that for CDBG to determine exactly how that needs to be implemented. And the tricky part is what time period.
Thank you. And we'll begin to wrap up. There are several other questions here, but we certainly want to get to some of our additional guests that are on the webinar today. And so I'll ask this final question. Considering the fact that we are receiving these funds and it's based on an urgent need, is the 70-30 requirements for the national objective going to be waived?
Well, whether it's going to be waived is really a question for HUD leadership and John and HUD leadership to decide. But the logic of, we're one of the very few programs in CDBG, the $5 billion that we got sounds like a lot until you realize we were inside a $2 trillion package. And CDBG and ESG and HOPWA, we're some of the only programs with income guidelines in those packages. And so, you know, a lot of our role is to protect and help deal with the special needs of low and moderate income people and vulnerable populations. So I think that, you know, my advice as a program practitioner would be to look for where CDBG can fill the gaps for those populations first, before talking about waiving the requirement that 70% of the funds need to be used for low and moderate income people.
Thank you. And I said I would end with that last question, but I do have a thank you here from one of our listeners, Mr. Gibbs, for you and your team for joining us today and providing this information and making an urgent request. It'd be great to hear from you and the team about any information or hints you can give confirming related CDBG waivers that are pending. I know the concern around doing that, but I think I want to take to heart the fact that they were thanking you for what you all have done so far and encouraging more.
Yeah, I would just echo what Jesse said earlier, that we do have a notice that we're working on that will kind of flesh that out in pretty good detail. I would say that we are listening very closely to what our stakeholders and communities around the country are asking for as they're looking at their communities and kind of thinking about their needs. And so people are communicating with us and we are listening. So we are kind of paying attention to that. We want to incorporate some of the community needs listening. And beyond that, I would say stay tuned and that will be out to you when that is ready.
Well, thank you again on behalf of NAHRO and our members, to you and the entire team for taking time today to answer these questions. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I turn the microphone back to you, Mr. Banham.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the HUD team. Lots of great information there. Now let's turn to our housing authority partners and our community agency partners. We'll start with George Guy. He is the North Central Regional Council of NAHRO president, as well as the chief executive officer and executive director of the Fort Wayne Housing Authority. George, welcome. Please.
Hi, Georgie.
Hello.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Hi. Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank the NAHRO team for having us and also our partners over at HUD with all that great information. I believe I'm here to talk to you all today about the ESG program and how we've been involved with our localities regarding that. We've been involved with the ESG program probably for over 2 or 3 years, over 3 years now. And that started, to be honest with you, with the local collaborative. They have our local homeless planning council, and we've been involved in that since they've had that. And that's kind of like their local continuum. During that process, there was, as many of you know, the government went to, in terms of how they labeled homelessness, a little bit different in terms of agencies that were doing that. So we saw some challenges there. And what I wanted to do was make sure that anything pertaining to housing, I wanted to make sure the housing authority was in that kind of space. So we have been able to partner with the city when it comes to them distributing the ESG funding. In addition to that, the state began to do a balanced estate continuum of care program for the state of Indiana, and we were a partner on that. We were the housing authority that was represented on that as well. And through that, we then began to partner with the state in terms of administering the program here in Fort Wayne as well. So we have been doing that over the last several years. I can tell you that we were deliberate. Again, we understood that we are not last resort housing, but we felt as though we needed to be, we wanted to be at the table when it comes to solutions regarding housing and things of that nature. So this was an opportunity. The reason why the city was interested in what we were doing, because we had a comprehensive kind of pre-rental program for those that were on our waiting list in terms of making sure that they were stabilized and ready before they got to that, kind of like a mobility program on the housing choice voucher. So we were doing that within our public housing space. And so they were interested in that, and that really captivated the reason why it was interesting to the city. And so we began to do that, introduce that type of program to the residents. Now we've been able to house individuals, and about 50%, over 50% of the people that have been in the program have been housed. A little less than 40% graduated the program, meaning that they were stable and they were able to continue on. Now, I just want to make sure that you understand that in administering this type of program, you have to have folks that have experience in dealing with the population of folks that are receiving these programs, and there are shelters. We had someone that are on staff that was happened to have a lot of extensive experience in dealing with homeless, understood the case management system and the reporting process as it pertains to that, because there's a lot of reporting and data tracking, as you all can understand. And similar to much of that is similar to what we're doing in terms of the world that we live in every day, but it is a little bit different. It's a little different. You have to have someone that understands that case management system. So I think that's why we've been successful in terms of partnering with our local entities as it pertains to the ESG program. We've saw some success there, and those type of things have made this thing really, each year it's improving, and I think our partners will say that as well.
Excellent, great information, George. Please hang around. We'll have some questions at the end of the session here. I do want to remind everyone, please, if you have any questions for George or for upcoming speaker Grace, please put those questions into the question box, into the chat feature, and they'll pop up into our queue, and we'll address those at our Q&A time at the end of the session. But with that, let's go ahead and pivot over to Grace Depter, the Deputy Director for Community and Economic Development for the City of Anaheim, California. Grace, thank you for joining us today. Grace, hang on one second. You're muted, it looks like. There you go.
Okay, ready?
Perfect, we can hear you. Thanks,
Okay,
Grace.
perfect. Well, thank you for the opportunity to participate today. Thank you to the HUD staff. That overview was incredibly helpful and is validating a lot of the things that we have going on here in the city of Anaheim. First, for very quick content, I'd like to just share that the Community and Economic Development Department for the city of Anaheim happens to be in a unique situation that we are the housing authority for the city of Anaheim, rolls up to the Community and Economic Development Department. We also administer several grants, which is the Community Development Block Grant, Home, ESG, and HOPWA. We have the opportunity, because we are under one umbrella, in addition to our workforce development, to kind of see the synergies and try to use our HUD funds to tackle these issues, to try to create what is truly a continuum of housing for folks. Pre-COVID, we were dealing with the emergency locally of homelessness in California, which is where Anaheim is located. You know, we have a very significant homeless issue, and so we have used emergency solutions grants, home dollars, HOPWA dollars, and Section 8 vouchers to create a continuum. The emergency shelter dollars being dollars that we use for case management, for motel vouchers, to support those the shelter system, the front line of getting people from the street into something quickly. Several years ago, we built into our Section 8 program a preference for homeless so that we could quickly get people into housing. However, we ran against a funding shortfall, as I'm sure many housing authorities are quite familiar with. As you know, as our costs per units go up, we can't always rely on the Section 8 program because funding just kind of ebbs and flows. So we pivoted to use home dollars, and so we do have a fairly robust tenant-based rental assistance program using home dollars. We use it for seniors, and we use it for two homeless populations, one being our family population and one being chronically homeless individuals program. That's supported by ESG through case management dollars, and then we do use the full authority of home dollars to provide rental assistance for 24 months. And in those 24 months, we look for opportunities to transition people into the voucher program should they need it, since case management identify that this is somebody, a family or an individual who needs longer term care. And so we often either transition them into project-based buildings that we are developing, also using home capital dollars, or into a set-aside, a preference that we've written into administrative plans for our Section 8 program. So those federal resources have definitely allowed us to build a system that addresses people from the beginning all the way to the end. As it relates to COVID-19 special funding, we are the recipients of community development block grant dollars, HOPWA dollars, and ESG. I was very grateful to hear a lot of the questions around using CDBG for emergency purposes. We are currently in the process of providing a program to do 3 months worth of emergency assistance using our community development block grant money. We were the recipient of approximately $2.5 million. And so half of that money is going to support our neediest businesses, which is our micro businesses with 5 employees or less. We have launched an emergency micro business loan product for those for that part of the community. And the second piece is this emergency rental assistance piece. We did so because in California and also locally here in Anaheim, there is an eviction moratorium, which basically indicates that until stay-at-home orders are lifted, which we anticipate to be probably not toward the end of June in many of our localities, that you cannot, landlords cannot issue eviction notices to landlords. To tenants. In addition to that, the eviction moratoriums also prescribe how repayments are to be handled locally in our city. You have up to 4 months after the eviction moratorium lifts to make those payments back to the landlords. However, we all recognize that given our current state, there will be many whose jobs don't transition back to full-time and quick amount of monies. And even if that is the case, you're saddled with 1 month's full month of rent, plus now having to pay back your accumulated debt. So using the CDBG dollars in that way has become very important to us. It is an undertaking, however, in that we do have to identify staff. This is a new program. We are having to identify systems, computer systems, or create a web presence, because while we're trying to help people very quickly, we also have the physical distancing requirements, and we can't have people coming to our offices applying. So that's something that certainly we've learned is another challenge, but where we are there, our IT team has quickly developed a software or a program that we can launch so that all applications are web-based. We anticipate that that will be heavily prescribed. We know that there's conversations about potentially ESG coming down for that type of assistance, and we're optimistic that that will happen. Traditionally, ESG in our world has been for the extremely low income folks, those in our shelter system. But we're looking forward to opportunities for that vehicle, whatever comes down, to really provide us with opportunities for expanded assistance all the way up to the 80% of AMI, which is what CDBG more traditionally allows us to use. The partnerships with the Housing Authority, in our mind, are absolutely critical. The Housing Authority has a waiting list. We will be the folks that get the calls for those who have been waiting for our rental assistance, who may be desperate, more desperate now than they were before. We've always had a high volume of calls for people inquiring about how long it's going to take us to get to them, but we know that those situations are just that much more dire. So having the CDBG as a resource to create this interim 3-month worth of emergency assistance will at least give us something as a resource to for our waiting list folks who come in and are looking for assistance from us. With the ESG dollars that we got from COVID-19, we did quickly fund 10 agencies who are previous ESG grantees under our existing program. And that money is largely going for motel vouchers to get homeless families who are among the most susceptible to this virus to get into more stable housing situations. Certainly grateful for the elimination of matching funds and a little bit more admin fee because, again, those are things that we had to do very quickly, and our social service partners certainly need those resources. I know that the home side of things, there haven't been waivers or what have you, but certainly using the tenant-based rental assistance allotment that we have may provide an opportunity for us to, should the CDBG emergency dollars not be enough, to look at tools there, although funding is always the challenge there. Again, having all three of the agencies, the housing authorities, the grantees, and what have you, under one program, allowing us really to use this as a true continuum, is something that we think is really a godsend for us. We lean on the housing authority team to teach our grantees and our grant management team what rent calculation looks like, what income verification looks like, what HQS looks like. So just, you know, those are multiple partners. In addition to direct administration, just that technical assistance piece is something that we certainly value. So I know I was allotted 10 minutes. I'm not sure quite where I am, but I will stop at this point.
So that was a lot of great information, Grace. We really do appreciate that information. You do have that unique perspective of being in the housing authority in the city, being together there. But let me bring George back in as well, and we do have some questions. There is room still in the question queue, though. Please, if you have any questions out there, please put them in the chat box or in the question queue, and they'll pop in, and we'll take a look at them. I do have a couple questions. Grace, let me start with yours. I think it's really based on that unique relationship that your housing authority and your city have, both being under the city umbrella. How, with CDBG, home, the ESG funds, even the HOPO funds, you have a little pull and tug between housing and businesses. You talked about the micro business loans. How do you work that balance when the housing authority and the community development programs are, you know, very closely tied together? How does that work with Anaheim?
We do sit down as an executive team and look at both sides of the equation. And in the case of COVID-19 specifically, because we have the workforce development team under our umbrella too, it was very clear that businesses were being impacted. We get what in California we call the MORE notices, so we know the number of employers that are letting people go, and we have an economic development team who has the pulse on our businesses, and we're getting a lot of that information. So not wanting to pick winners and losers and understanding that this is a pandemic that has hit everybody, we decided to split that pot. But still with a mindset that we were going to advocate through NAHRO, any other vehicle, for additional rental assistance. Thankfully, you know, the federal government has put out things like payroll protection programs and a lot of other things for businesses, although the micro businesses do report that that's difficult for them to access. So there is that avenue from them. For our renters, they don't have the PPE and the others, so we knew it was essential to put some money there and then continue the advocacy for there to be more money in that bucket.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate that. George, I have a question for you as well. Again, as Fort Wayne Housing Authority is a separate entity from the city, the state, how, when you started the ESG program, how would that relationship start? Where was the connection where the housing authority, did the housing authority go to the state to talk to them? Did the state come to the housing authority? What built that relationship?
Well, it started when we were, again, we were in the space of talking about solutions for housing in general, but specifically at the time, it was about homelessness. And what we were able to do at the time, which sounds like a big thing, we were able to say, hey, one of the things that we're going to do as a housing authority is give a preference for those individuals that were participating in different homeless programs and things of that nature. Upon doing that, that was a pretty unique thing, and it was recognized by the state and their consultant organization, I would say CSH. And at that time, they were, again, like I said, they were starting the balance of state continuum of care. So we began to be recognized within the state as a housing authority that was a part of those solutions, the conversations that pertains to homelessness and things of that nature. And so that, excuse me, that put us in that space. So then when the grants come in, Indiana is a state that has been very proactive as it pertains to homeless grants and things of that nature, been very successful in that regard. It put our agency in line to be, when we looked at applying for the grant, they then looked at what we had been doing and what we were proposing to do. And that allowed us to be able to administer it through this, from the state here in the city of Fort Wayne.
Absolutely. No, yeah, and that's great. I think that's one of the pieces we definitely wanted to get across here is the housing authority is a good partner to the governmental side, the state, the county, and the city. I think on that note too, there's a question for both you, George, and Grace, and I'll have Grace start with it. What are some of the things that a housing authority really can almost sell themselves as to the grant organization, the city and the state? How can that housing authority really provide, or what can they bring to the table to be a good partner with the city, state, and county?
So there's a lot of technical expertise within a housing authority that a state government and a homeless service provider do not necessarily know. When we started to use home for homelessness prevention, we put all that money out to the nonprofit sector, but the home program requires HQS knowledge. The housing authority understands that. The housing authority understands rent calculations. Housing authority also has a very long, in many places, has waiting lists. In other words, we have the clientele who most likely needs this type of assistance. So I think it's a matter of opening up that dialogue and having your nonprofit community, and more importantly, probably your state and local partners understand just the sphere in which housing authorities operate, the depth of which we're involved in homelessness solutions, and the volume of people that we deal with on phone calls, and just sometimes just triaging needs. And so we are frontline in many ways, and it is not always known by other local officials, just the wealth of technical assistance, resource, and that a housing authority can be. So that opens the door to then, I know this already, let me just manage it on your behalf, if that's the will of the housing authority.
No, well, it makes a lot of sense. George?
Yeah, and I would agree with Grace. I think it's important that we let individuals know that we have capacity. We do the work. We're the experts when it comes to dealing with folks that need housing. They're extremely low income. I think we just can't be afraid to say that, and we have to find a way to articulate that message where it makes sense when we talk about that whole space of housing solutions. And so it's homeless and beyond, but this particular space, we can really speak to that. And I think that case management point is really important. I think we take that for granted in terms of our housing specialists and even our site managers and all the work that they do in terms of case management and navigating through resources and things of that nature. And then our waiting list is a good sample of what goes on in the community. So we can speak to these things on a technical level very well. And I think that we just need to be able to say those things and articulate.
Georgie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please, Adrian, go.
Yeah, I have a question for both of our panelists here. We heard Mr. Gibbs talk about some of the waivers available and some of the eligible activities. Are there certain parts of your operations right now or with the new CARES funds that there's some waiver authorities that you still hope for that would make your response to the pandemic more seamless?
Go ahead, Grace. I'll let you go.
A lot of the waivers that have been granted, particularly around income verification, are very well received. I would say that we're still evaluating waivers that we need because this is a quickly evolving situation. The one thing that I know is going to be an issue for us, and it's going to be administrative fees. A lot of this work, while we're certainly grateful to see the cap from the 7.5 to the 10% under ESG and what have you, as I indicated, for the 3-month emergency program, we're having to build systems, having to identify staff, and those are things we're more than willing to take on, but they are large undertakings.
I would agree with that. What Grace said. I think that there were some things that we see that they're improving. It is a great deal of administrative work. I don't want to not say that. I think the match requirements show some improvement there. But I do think that what Grace talked about in terms of that temporary thing, it is a challenge to try to do that in a temporary environment and requirement.
Absolutely. Another question just came out again for both of you. If you had to give advice to a housing authority, again, looking to enter the programs, be a subrecipient of ESG or a home or CDBG, what would be the starting point? Where would you have a housing authority start? Grace, go ahead.
I would say pick up the phone, get to know who the people are on that other side, and just come approach the conversation from what you bring to the table. Often in situations particularly like this, I know I have appreciated anybody who comes forward and say, I'm looking to help, this is what I can do for you. This right now, as challenging as it is also an opportunity for housing authorities who have not operated in this space to build those relationships, to be a true partner, and to be get themselves in a position to be thought of as the go-to entity when these things come up. I mean, I know in California, once hopefully, and I'm very optimistic, once COVID is behind us, we'll still have homelessness. We still have senior tsunami coming forward. So the needs of the populations that we serve, they're not going away. So use this as an opportunity to introduce who you are, bring your technical assistance, so that you're thought of first when this ongoing opportunities present themselves.
Absolutely.
I agree with much of what Grace said there. I will say that specifically, the first thing you can do is check out and see where your continuum of care is located at, who convenes that, and you get in touch with them and make sure that you're a part of the continuum of care. That's where it starts. I think you have to build some equity in those relationship building in terms of them understanding much of what we told you today, and it starts at your local continuum.
No, that's absolutely, that was great advice for both of you. I fully agree with that housing authorities have skills already built into from the program that they run that definitely can translate into other programs as well. So to take advantage of the knowledge and skills of your staff and your agency, you can be truly a pillar of your communities. With that though, I would like to thank George and Grace. Appreciate all your insight, all your information. You've been a tremendous value to our members out there. And again, we really do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
With that, we'll wrap things up. Again, I'm Georgie Bana, our correctional director, also Tess Embry. We're both available to you. If you have any questions and follow up, please reach out to us. The NAHRO blog is a great resource for hot topics, up-to-date information. We're updating constantly on the NAHRO blog. Also on the congressional relations side, our advocacy page, making sure that we are providing information to HUD and to Congress. NAHRO.org/advocacy, great information, and you can send letters to your Congress people to make sure they understand the needs of our programs. Again, with that, we'd like to thank our the NAHRO Business Partners Council. Again, if you a vendor who works closely with housing authorities, learning more information at NAHRO.org. With that, we'll let everyone go. We appreciate all your time. Appreciate all our speakers today. With that, have a great afternoon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.